You've probably heard someone say "ditto" in a casual conversation. Maybe after a compliment, maybe after a complaint, or maybe when they just didn't feel like repeating themselves. It's one of those tiny words that saves time, slips into conversations without effort, and somehow feels both modern and old-fashioned at the same time. But here's the twist. Ditto actually has a surprisingly long history. It stretches far beyond memes, texting shortcuts, and even beyond the English language itself. In fact, this little word has roots in ancient record-keeping, bureaucratic nightmares, and one very interesting Italian dialect that ended up influencing global communication. So today, let's unpack where Ditto really came from, why it became so useful, and how it stuck around for centuries without ever feeling outdated. Right here, on History of Simple Things. The word ditto didn't start out as internet slang or something people said when they were too tired to talk. It began in medieval Italy, particularly in the Tuscan regions, where clerks and record keepers used the word ditto, from the Italian detto, meaning said, as a quick way to avoid writing the same things over and over again. In those days, bookkeeping wasn't exactly glamorous. Every record had to be written by hand, line after line, page after page. So if a merchant was recording a series of dates or purchases, and the same month kept repeating, they'd simply write ditto beneath it to indicate that the same word above should apply again. This tiny shortcut saved ink, time, and frustration. It was essentially the medieval version of copy-paste. What makes it even more interesting is that this wasn't a slang word people tossed around in daily conversation. It was a technical trick for clerks, the kind of people who probably dreamed in ledgers and columns. As trade grew between Italy and the rest of Europe, especially during the Renaissance, many Italian bookkeeping terms quietly slipped into other languages. English merchants picked up ditto sometime in the late 1600s and early 1700s, when trade with Italian city-states was buzzing. And since English record keepers faced the same exhausting handwriting tasks, they embraced the shortcut without hesitation. By the early 18th century, ditto had officially entered English dictionaries, described as a term used in inventories and accounts to repeat information. You'd see things like 5 shirts, ditto buttons, or April 3rd, ditto 4, ditto 5, and written ledgers everywhere. The word spread so quickly that everyday people started borrowing it, not just merchants and clerks. Once they recognized how convenient it was, ditto stepped outside the office and into casual speech. Suddenly, kids, families, neighbors, and even politicians were using it in conversations. A simple clerk's shortcut had turned into a perfectly normal English word. At first glance, ditto seems like such an insignificant word, but its popularity makes perfect sense. Humans naturally look for shortcuts, especially in communication. Saying ditto is quick, clear, and efficient. It doesn't just repeat a statement, it mirrors it with precision. And unlike saying same, me too, or I agree, it carries a slightly playful old-school charm. In everyday conversations, ditto became a kind of verbal nod, an easy way to say, what you said applies to me, exactly as you said it. When people began using it in letters, jokes, and even literature, it cemented itself as part of everyday language. Even today, despite everything becoming digital, voice-to-text algorithms, emojis, and shorthand phrases haven't replaced ditto. It's short, it's friendly, and it somehow feels universal. It also lives on in phrases like ditto marks, those small quotation-like marks used in lists to show repetition. The word may be tiny, but it has an endurance most slang words can only dream of. If you grew up in the 90s, the first thing you might think of when you hear Ditto is the shape-shifting Pokemon that looks like a pink blob with a permanent smile. It was named Ditto because it can copy any other Pokemon perfectly, which is honestly the most accurate branding possible. But the word pops up in movies too. One of the most iconic uses was in the 1990 film Ghost, where Ditto became a romantic way of responding to "I love you" when the character didn't want to repeat the phrase directly. Even modern texting culture uses it, though not as heavily as its cousins like same or emojis. Still, Ditto stands out because it carries a certain charm. It's like the linguistic equivalent of vintage clothing. Simple, classic, and never truly out of style. And despite being centuries old, it fits perfectly in memes, casual chats, and even professional messages when you want to sound breezy but clear. Long before photocopiers came along, offices relied on something called a Ditto machine, a quirky, alcohol-based duplicator that helped people make quick copies of documents, worksheets, and even classroom tests. It wasn't named after the word by coincidence. It earned the nickname because it allowed users to create multiple duplicates, or in other words, dittos. These machines became iconic in schools during the mid-20th century, not only for their convenience but also for their unforgettable smell. Students from that era still remember freshly printed worksheets that came out slightly purple with a strange sweet aroma. While the technology eventually disappeared once photocopiers took over, the Ditto machine gave the word a new life, connecting it to mass duplication long before digital printers existed. It's a small but fascinating artifact of office history that helped keep the word Ditto alive in an entirely different way. So the next time someone says Ditto, remember that it isn't just a casual shortcut. It's a tiny relic of handwritten ledgers and medieval bookkeeping, a word that began as a scribbled time saver and somehow made its way into our modern conversations, movies, and pop culture. It's a reminder that even the simplest words can carry long histories, quietly traveling across centuries and languages. And if you ever feel like appreciating how language evolves, just look at words like this, the ones we use without thinking, but which hold stories deeper than we realize. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other bingeable channels. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.